recognition, so you have to keep clarifying. But if you use that particular topic constantly for over 10 minutes, then it wears out. So you have to keep referring to it.
Well, I think it'll be better also if it comes up in the context of phone calls.
I
have a series of questions here.
My voice is so fucking clear, man. Their reception is very good, or the sound is good.
The whole hookup was great.
Yeah, like I'm
no
right there.
Fucking
and I'm talking the perfect distance from the mouthpiece. I'm like right at the right point. I'm not too close, too far away. It's just perfect, isn't it?
And also,
was that what you meant, Carol, earlier? How clear it was?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there listening to you on the headphones, and I could have listened to you on the straight from your voice, but it was better to hear it on the headphones.
Amplified. You know,
going from here to KPFK, back through the air, back to Venice.
Right. Now that's a discounted experience. The electricity reveals more about us because you take the natural body and put it through electricity. Electricity amplifies your brain's perception of things. So this is effective TV. When politicians and Big Brother started strutting around in the 50s, they didn't know that TV would enhance them beyond their little puny motives and their visage, their face, and then communicate more than they intended. So
Paul who?
Paul?
You said politician?
Politicians, Big Brother.
Who is he?
Politicians?
Politician. He's a Phoenician. Police. Daryl Gates. What?
Did Leo ask you about a politician?
Sit down, Bob.
No.
He said politicians too?
I don't know. I don't remember that.
Politician.
No such. I mean, there's Titian the artist. I never took it as Titian the artist.
Who did he ask you about? Because that's what I thought you were talking about. That's who I thought you read.
No. I don't know what. I was talking about Paul. I don't know what. That's a weird one. You have to check.
Paul Tinchell?
Paul Twitchell. Twitchell.
Who is he?
He's the founder. He's a mystic guy of the 60s who created the book In My Soul I Am Free, and it was his popularization of the science of Eckankar.
Did he ever make movies in Hollywood?
No. Twitchell was just a fringe mystic who had a cult. He was a cult.
Okay.
And, what were you just saying? Yeah, it's interesting. There's the karmic connection. He asked me about Paul Twitchell. That was one of the first guys I studied, Paul Twitchell.
Is it?
Yeah, before I met Cosmic Awareness.
By reading a book.
We found it in Montreal, I think it was.
Yeah, we were trying to astral project right from the beginning, and we didn't even realize we were already doing it.
Really? But
electrically.
This guy, you go, we're doing this, and then you go, let's see if there's any books on this.
No, we weren't doing it.
Okay.
She means we were doing it electrically.
Right. I understand that, but how did you go about finding his book?
I found it in Montreal, I guess, in a bookstore. Bought it, read it, and we took his course. We sent away and took his correspondence course, telling you how to meditate and astral project. And you go beyond astral projection to soul projection, which I mentioned on the CD. I use a Twitchell term in my CD. I go the astral body and the causal body. The causal body is stuff from Twitchell. And so there's a karmic connection between Leo and I because he brings up Paul Twitchell, and that occasionally happens.
He said he's reading them?
Yeah, he knows about Twitchell. And, he's into the occult. And that's Dave, the food store guy, Baldwin Foods, the guy who called Dave Worcester and all that, the guy who got fired. He first got introduced. He asked me about Twitchell when he first met me at the store. That was the thing between us. And he was amazed I knew about Twitchell because he was into Twitchell at that point. So what were we talking about? So politicians, when Big Brother started strutting around in the 50s trying to do a 1984 thing on people, they didn't know that their faces and their communications communicated more intimately their mental motives via the TV screen, just like you get a more intimate sense of me by hearing me on tape, because here's the bias of electric environment. It shifts you to inner. In other words, if I'm talking to you now, I'm just normal, natural Bob.
Right.
If you take me as a virtual reality or just as an electric thing, headphones, you are hearing more in your ear from me than you would get in your natural hearing abilities.
Right.
So because the electric environment makes it more internal and sensitive, then you tend toward inner introspection. And that's what Marshall says. The electric environment drives people into inner tripping because it sensitizes you to inner implications of a natural voice by the amplification of it electrically. And so that's what you're doing. You can get more and probe me better doing the headphone than listening to me in person, right? That's the whole McLuhan point. So people didn't realize that we were X-rayed. Electrically, we were X-rayed. More was revealed to people, and that's why the politicians freaked in the 60s and the 70s, because nobody could take them serious, because the politicians didn't know that they were revealing more than they thought they were by their body language, their stiffness, and that's why everybody started trying to clean up their bodies and get into holistic health, because they saw themselves and people on TV, and it magnified their frailties even more. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. That's the inner trip. It's a very subtle shift. Just like slight shift. Like, the way I'm hearing this, I'm hearing myself more intimately than I heard myself when I was saying it.
Right.
So I'm not replaying myself. We're making a new version of myself here. So I want to go through the experience of hearing myself mutated, right? Which is what you guys experience. You get the point?
Yeah.
A way of in-depth pattern recognition, so you have to keep clarifying. But if you use that particular topic constantly for over 10 minutes, then it wears out. So you have to keep referring to it.
Well, I think it'll be better also if it comes up in the context of phone calls.
Yeah.
I have a series of questions here, and you can deal with them singly or as a group.
Just another theme evoked by Everything's Disappeared, and this is expressed by Finnegan's Wake, which is the perfect portrait of our time and our century, is that all nouns have disappeared. Everything is a verbal process. So everything has disappeared also means that all nouns have disappeared. So you as a noun have disappeared, but you are wearing new environments. So Dave Porter is something that cannot be visualized.
I'm a process rather than a thing.
Yeah, but you're a process of the media technologies interpenetrating. So you are the television screen. You are automobiles now because you're inside the satellite proscenium arch.
Well, this is the nice thing about radio, is I can be in everybody's living room at the same time without actually having to go there.
That's right. You're not in their living room. You're in their central nervous system. You're even past their ear. We are all in that
Heavens, they've been violated.
Which can't be visualized.
I like the way he starts laughing there, because he's learning right there. He's learning how intimate they've been raped. They've been violated. I'm inside their fucking heads. And people don't realize that. So as soon as I said to him, he got it in a perceptual way and started laughing. And he expressed the immediate shock of it by going, God, they've been violated. You know what I mean? There's evidence of perceptual communication right there.
I'll fuck anything that moves. I'll fuck anything in any living room.
I'll fuck anything that doesn't even move. It's like, I'm fucking you anyways. I don't even have to be near you to fuck you.
On the same phone line.
And so nostalgia would be, since we can fuck anything discarnately immediately, then nostalgia for kinetic space is Dennis Hopper saying, I want to fuck things that move. And it's such a relief from being interpenetrated discarnately that I'll fuck anything that moves just so I can have movement, right? Now there's an explanation of, Andrew Saris should have me explain this to him. And there's an example how I'll throw in something, they'll go, how do you know about Andrew Saris? Is he still alive? You know what I mean? Bob's Cultural Encyclopedia pours out of Bob. What's happening, girl?
None.
So, is Andrew Saris still reviewing for The Voice?
I don't know, but he should be.
He's very old.
Still. I like him. I went out to lunch.
And I told you I invaded him once. I went in there and tiraded him about not knowing enough for Claude. I was Bob doing
Did
the
you
Bob.
really?
Yeah, it was in 1975 when I was in New York. I went up to his class and I sat in his fucking class. And then after, I went to his office and had it out with him. And even talked about Zappa. But anyways, let's
Everybody's living room at the same time without actually having to go there.
That's right. You're not in their living room. You're in their central nervous system. You're even past their ear. We are all in that
Heavens, they've been violated.
Zone, which can't be visualized, but it's like we're all on the same phone line, intercom. So we are inside each other's heads right now, and the living room is inside you. So that's an inappropriate visual metaphor to say you're in the living room. You're trying to say what it is, but be more technical and say you are in everybody's head, and they are inside your head.
Well, maybe they can't, I use the visual thing because that's what most people relate to. Maybe that's too pink.
Yeah, and no, that's the problem with verbal language. As a medium, spoken language does have immediate sensory references like what we see and hear. And so it's hard to mirror the post-verbal languages of the electric media. So yeah, you got it. It's like T.S. Eliot said in Sweeney Agonistes, that old poem. He says, I got to use words when I talk to you. you can use that as a logo on your show in the future.
Well, it's something that Charles Ives said too. If I use words, you'll understand exactly the opposite.
That's right. That's good. Did you detect any Ives influence in Dave Neufeld's work on the CD you played today?
Well, the ragtime rhythms. I think rock and roll is closer to ragtime than it is to jazz.
Yeah. Well, Phineas Wake is rock and roll in print.
Okay, but that's still visual space.
That's what?
That's still visual space.
Oh, yeah. Well, the last book was Ulysses, the last novel. Phineas Wake is not a novel. It is a remythizing of the visual space of the page as an anti-environment to the electronic vortex. So Phineas Wake gave us a way to see what we couldn't see anymore. That's why it's not something you read, it's something you study, because it's in-depth and multi-layered. In other words, he retrieved the visual page as an archetype, and that's partly what we were saying what's happening since 45. We've had these archetypal fakes retrieved, but the genuine fake is Phineas Wake. All right?
Okay. I like this. Now, before we go to phone callers, let
that's
me remind
when
people, you can call in at 9855.
When he goes, I like this. Go back over there when you talk. Go back over there when you talk.
When he said I like this, I knew that I'd won, that we were now in the slack zone. His little pink self that would resist this was totally converted. I like this. Like, he laughs probably at all these words spewing out.
I like this. I'm having fun.
Yeah, he's getting massaged, you know. So at that point, I knew we were going into the real bomb zone, like with Mike Dyer. You know, once Mike would break down and start laughing, then I knew we were broken through all resistance.
I'll do it, Bobby. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All right?
Okay. I like this. Now, before we go to phone callers, let me remind people you can call in at 985-5735, and you will be able to speak to Bob. But I want to take another 5 minutes or so. Now, let me just go through the series of questions here, and you can take them individually. 2 calls already. Or you can answer them as a group.
Both
now,
of them were in the...
Both
these
were
are
the
the
Wilsons.
what made the 50s?
Okay, you want to just rewind a bit? I don't want to miss anything. Okay.
Calls already. Or you can answer them as a group. Now, these are the questions. What made the 50s the 50s? And what made the 60s the 60s? And there's 2 parts to that. The 70s the 70s, the 80s the 80s, and what makes the 90s the 90s?
Well, that's actually outlined on my memo to Prince Charles in the first CD.
Well, it's also in the second CD. The
The charts are referred to in the second CD. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it's also in the second CD.
Yeah. The 2 charts are on the second CD, and there's another kind of chart in the first CD. But basically...
Well, you mean the one where it gives the dates and the metamorphosis? That's in the second CD as well. So.
Yeah, you're right. That's on the back of the second CD. So all the charts are in the second CD if someone wants to avoid the first CD. But simply, the hidden ground in the 50s was black and white TV. So the effects of the mosaic image of a black and white TV screen begin to surface in all levels of world culture, especially in the United States, where the TV environment was set up first. So the 50s are a product of TV. The 60s are a product of color TV.
Well, which part of the first? There's actually kind of 2 sub-decades to the 60s.
That's right. Are you going by my chart?
No, I'm just going by my own experience.
But
No,
no, that's
you are
true.
absolutely
That is
right.
my chart.
Look,
Like, for a minute, I didn't know whether he was thinking on his own or not, but it is. See, I have the 2 divisions there. You see what I'm saying? I got Normail and Marsh McLuhan. I do divide it. So I thought for a second he's referring to that, and then he's not, and then he's doing it on his own. But if he did it on his own, he's right. You know what I mean, Jerry? There are two divisions by the 60s. So are you ready to? What's going on there? Everybody's all distracted and looking at newspapers. Carol's washing the dishes.
Clean this file up. You still want to read this Hillary Clinton article?
I finished it. You can throw it out. Hey, can you just rewind? Let's just go through that now.
right. Are you going by my chart?
No, I'm just going by my own experience.
No, that you are absolutely right. I'll refer to that in a second. But in general, black and white TV is the ground for the 50s. Totally different medium and effect is color TV in the 60s. And then getting into the 70s, the hidden ground is the computer, which created the 2-bit world of yes, no, width. And the ground of the 80s is the satellite. Now, the satellite environment started in 1957. The black and white TV was by 52. The color TV was by the middle 60s, and the computer environment was starting to surface in the middle 50s. So when I stretch it out from 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, those are culture legs as collective population populations assimilate the effects. So you're right. In the 60s, after the effect of black and white TV, which was the beatniks, all right, and the Sputnik brought beatniks into the culture because they turned the planet into a theater. So therefore, the American dream became an art form, and that was the syndrome of going on the road. So the beatniks, you see, Kerouac wrote his book in the late 40s, early 50s, but it wasn't until 57 when the necessary collective psychological and sociological response was evoked to have a meaning for the book On the Road. And so it came out in 57, the year of Sputnik. Then black and white TV became an art form by 1960, and that was expressed with the Beatles. So the Beatles start to surface in the early 60s, punning on the beatniks. And then in 1965, color TV took away the Beatles and gave us the hippies, which was the tribal in-crowd, in a sense. The hippies were the post-Beatles. The Beatles were individuals. As a group, the tribal effect is starting, post-Elvis. But the hippies were totally anonymous retrievals of Paleolithic culture, which Terence McKenna is now a homeopathic retrieval of. Now, here's the division in the 60s. In 1968, satellite TV made the hippies into yippies. Paul Krasner and the scene that'll be at the Millennium Madness tonight will be a retrieval of the yippie effect, which was the satellite merging with color TV. And then the computer turned the yippies into yuppies. And so these trends, if I put dates on them, they are specific in the pop culture form, but as environments, their effects go over more of a decadal level.
Well, things take a while to mature. Do you think we were set up for Ronald Reagan and everything because of some things that were...
That was one of the best things. It's talking about Kerouac and how that...
Right, and what I'm doing, I didn't know Wilson be listening, but Wilson's going to have to tell Leary, hey man, that guy did your chart and he might have did it better. You know what I mean? His whole fucking Leary chart.
If Wilson even reads the chart.
What?
If Wilson even reads the chart.
Yeah, I don't. I say this as a way to be specific. Who knows if Wilson's going to tell Leary? But just to get you to identify.
These guys keep up on each other. They have to.
Yeah. Well, their information pattern recognized. That's why Wilson was listening, because somebody told him. He says, "Hey, we should check this out." Roy had mentioned me, so he's looking for new stuff, cognitive thrills of pattern recognition. So he said, "Well, let's listen to this guy." But the thing is that I'm just saying that to you, Jerry, to stress the importance of the synchronicity of it, whether it happens or not. Leary is told. The point is, I'm getting it out into the Wilson zone on this show. The chart that I claim Leary unconsciously ripped off.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that was a good section, and it was interesting that Wilson responded. Not necessarily to it, but subconsciously it's there, right? So that was good. So we can just rewind just a bit. And
they are specific in the pop culture form, but as environments, their effects go over more of a decadal level.
Well, things take a while to mature. Do you think we were set up for Ronald Reagan and everything because of some things that were... It almost seems like in the 70s, and in sometime in the late decade of the 70s, if Reagan hadn't existed, someone would have come along to fill it because we were almost set up for something like that.
Yeah, I did the setting up of it. You had to go through, hey, shut up, there's a guy who's laughing in the background here.
okay, rewind that. I want to hear.
You're the one who's responsible for Ronald Reagan.
That's right. Now,
Let's go back. I want to hear. Don't laugh.
We were almost set up for something
Don't
like
laugh
that.
yeah, I
again,
did
Jerry.
the setting up of it.
You just interrupted.
You had to go through, hey, shut up, there's a guy laughing in the background here.
Well,
Yeah, you
you're
can
the
hear
one who's
you laugh
responsible
just
for
a
Ronald
bit. Just
Reagan.
go back again,
That's right.
Jerry.
Now,
You're getting, woo! Jerry's coming. Connie's giving Jerry a blowjob in the background.
Sometime in the late decade of the 70s. If Reagan hadn't existed,
Oh, sorry,
someone would have
Carol.
come along to fill it because we were almost set up for something like that.
yeah, I did the setting up of it. You had to go through, hey, shut up, there's a guy laughing in the background here.
Well, you're the one who's responsible for Ronald Reagan.
That's right. Now, see, the last phase, what comes after the yuppie? Well, the guppy. And the yuppie is the love child of the
They breed
computer
like
and
guppies.
the satellite. And the Reagan is, by 1981, you have the mixed corporate media as a retrieval, because everything disappeared by 1977. So the mixed corporate media of television, computer, and satellite, with an American twist, because the American environment was the world environment from the 50s on, had to be retrieved. So Reaganism retrieved that with the tweeze, and it was a Manipian satirical tweeze of a radio effect. So Reagan retrieved America of the 90s, but he really was a TV image, so he waved, and he also brought in Star Wars.
I go radio of the
Amalgam-
90s? I should have said 40s. What?
Retrieved. So Reaganism retrieved that with the tweeze, and it was a Menippean satirical tweeze of a radio effect. So Reagan retrieved America of the 90s, but he really was a TV image, so he waved, and he also brought in Star
stop
Wars.
that.
So he
Total
was a
mistake. For the record, it should be Reagan retrieved the 40s. I mean, how did he retrieve the 90s in 19... But actually, I could use that since everything was happening from 45 on. Then we could have the 90s in the 50s because the 90s are a replay of the 60s and 50s anyways all the time, right? So retrieval of the 90s. No wonder the Leos of the world get a little. I don't know if I totally agree. What did you mean by that, Bob? Okay.
Amalgam tweeze, and it was a Menippean satirical tweeze of a radio effect. So Reagan retrieved America of the 90s, but he really was a TV image, so he waved, and he also brought in Star Wars. So he was a curious amalgam of all the media after the collapse of the solar government and the collapse of the universal government. So he was the first American mythic stage retrieval, as explained in my chart. Now I'm aware of these. What I'm saying is kind of jargonistic and is maybe hard to follow for a new listener, but the point is to tape it, refer to the charts, and go over it, and it'll make more sense later. So I'm just putting this on the record.
Now, one more thing. What is making the 90s the 90s?
That's Lockdown Bob Rule, and because everything disappeared in 1977, from 77 to 90, according to my chart, you have universal government warfare and visible and acoustic holograms. So pop culture is the effects of the hologram. The effects always precede the causes being the particular technology. When the technology becomes an environment as used by the population in general, then it is environmental. But the effects of that precede the phase when something becomes environmental. So we've had the hologram effect from 77 to 90. In 1990 2020, you have, I should elaborate for it. When everything disappeared in 77, you had a hologramic retrieval of everything from 77 to 90, and Reagan was the American version of that. And so were all the other leaders, Thatcher, Khomeini, Mulroney in Canada, the Chinese Revolution, and the Soviet Union. Gorbachev.
Sort of like
they
summer
were holographic
reruns.
retrievals.
Sort of like summer reruns.
That's right, and they were holograms. By 1990, the holographic
summer
retrieval has
reruns,
no more
Jerry?
power, so we're...
What?
The summer reruns is Gil Scott Heron's rerun.
Oh, David loves that song.
Yeah, and that is he did that song about 1980. You know, it's Ronald Reagan's 1981, right?
Yeah.
So he was on the pop culture level expressing the subliminal effects. He wasn't talking about the causes, but he was picking up subliminal somehow that Ron Reagan was Ron rerun. And technically, it was hologramic retrievals, hologramic reruns. But you know what I mean? The song,
Yeah.
the pop culture shows a little bit of the figure. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and that's probably why he said summer reruns. He's probably thinking Jill Scott Heron. If that's his favorite song.
He likes that. I think it could be.
So were all the other leaders, Thatcher, Khomeini, Mulroney in Canada, the Chinese Revolution, and the Soviet Union. Gorbachev.
Sort of like
they
summer
were holographic
reruns.
retrievals.
Sort of like summer reruns.
That's right, and they were holograms. By 1990, the hologramic retrieval has no more power, so we're disappeared to the second or third or nth degree. So we now have invisible retrievals, inaudible retrievals, where one individual represents whole collective mythic stages which were retrieved from 77 to 90. So that's why on the press release, various mythic, holeopathic. Now, a hologram is a hologram, but if you put the hologram into homeopathic invisibility and miniaturization, it becomes holeopathic. So a holeopathic is a hologram on a homeopathic level. And so the 90s feature holeopathic retrievals of the hologramic 77 to 90 period. And they are the enhancement of one individual who represents a whole collective mythic stage. And the general series of them are Rush Limbaugh, Camille Paglia, Bill Clinton, Terence McKenna, Frank Zappa, Michael Murphy, Jerry Mander, Stephen Hawking, the Gulf War, a retrieval of World War III as a holeopathic retrieval, very tiny and quickly accomplished, and Noam Chomsky. And all these guys and women represent mythic stages. For example, Rush Limbaugh is a retrieval, a holopathic retrieval of the conservative mythic stage, but it's all focused on him as the whole stage. His audience wants him to represent them. So the whole population is basically turning into a cult, a zombie cult as art form. They do it satirically, ironically. They celebrate the fact they're celebrating one person. And that's what I think Bob's Mediacology, as represented by Tom Touché's release of it, Bob's Mediacology is a homeopathic retrieval of Bob, of me, which I operated in Toronto from 87 to 91, so that I am the hidden homeopathic environment, the one that's behind and satirizing all of them.
Let me ask you one more question. You got a quick prediction for the 90s?
That's the first time.
Well, the next 2 decades?
Lockdown Bob.
That's the first time I imply that the satirical level of the CD, you know, that it's a character or whatever. I say it's satirizing homeopathic retrieval. See, this interview, I explained in the Worcester, Massachusetts interview the homeopathic retrievals for the first time, which we haven't got a proper tape of yet, but we'll get it. And now I'm saying what Bob is in relation to that, a satire of the homeopathic retrieval, okay? So so this interview follows from the Worcester interview, which was the last one I did.
Rule 1, so that I am the hidden homeopathic environment, the one that's behind and satirizing all of them.
Let me ask you one more question. You got a quick prediction for the 90s? The next 2 decades?
Lockdown Bob Rule, where his art form will be realized as the greatest art form of the 20th century, and beyond Joseph Beuys. Joseph Beuys in 1950 added a couple of chapters to Finnegan's Wake. Well, what I'm doing is beyond all holy offices expressed in the CD, which are McLuhan, Herbert Armstrong, Zappa, LaRouche, Dr. Peter Beater, May Brussels, Finnegan's Wake, Cosmic Awareness, Garrett Dean, and Club 22. All these important holy offices in themselves will be encapsulated and expanded upon, in retrospect, as a quite subgenius, I hate to use the word, but a subgenius operation expressed through me. So
Is
you're
that-
talking to the greatest artists alive, and I don't mean that as a boast. It's a fact. I'm also
I had to rant
Hate to use the word.
What'd you say?
Hate to use the word.
That was good to get
We
that.
gotta send a copy of this to Stay.
I love that. I hate to use the word.
Especially how I like how you go off on Stang. You go, that guy's a nerd. He wears glasses, and Stang's gonna go, Bob wears glasses too. Wait a minute. That's the old, because you don't qualify it with anything, but he's geeky and he wears glasses.
Yeah, it's the only thing that makes him a geek. But it's when he does his rants, he's up there holding his glasses as he's reading his notes. He's always going, he's going, well, Bob said this, and he's always positioning them, And that guy, the Robert Anton Wilson double, knew immediately that's what I meant. That was the image he had. Geeky guys reading and fixing their glasses, right? Because he said their verbal stuff doesn't come off as well, their stage stuff. I like it, but he kind of was critical of their verbal stuff doesn't work. So
you did qualify. You go, well, I know what I've been saying. I met him, and you say this like not totally. That guy's like you're not a total name caller.
I'm not a total put down.
Put down name caller like the guy comes off as sounding.
Yeah. So but the funny thing is, I have always been generous to Stang. I've always been generous to Stang in the interviews up to this point, where I say I like this book. It's very funny and it's a great interpretation of me. Not the whole story, but it's a great interpretation. But this is the first time I actually get a little negative and call him a geek. You know what I mean? Which is
you're just
appropriate.
matching with that guy.
Yeah, I'm matching with him. He's evoking it, but also it's time for me to counter his ignorance expressed in his letters to the editor. You know what I mean? It's time to me not to be so generous.
Right.
So that's a new level on that point. But that rant is pretty good. I'm just rolling on and I go, I'm qualifying every sentence. Well, there's a subgenius. I hate to say it, but subgenius. But this homeopathic thing, man, you'd have to go back. I mean, they don't know what I'm talking about. But if they listen to it, it's all logically explained, defined as I go along, right? So that's good. And then I go, I'm the greatest artist alive. It's like a guitar solo.
Upon, in retrospect, is a quite subgenius. I hate to use the word, but a subgenius operation expressed through me. So you're talking to the greatest artist alive, and I don't mean that as a boast. It's a fact. I'm also the greatest scientist alive. And anybody want to talk about that, they ask me about the D-cell.
Is that what Bob Rule is?
Lockdown Bob Rule is the recognition. Since I locked down Bob Rule by 1990, and that's why turn-in taxes, Gorbachev and Prince Charles go down, the population for the next 30 years gradually realizes this fact.
Okay, one more quick thing, and then I want to go to some phone calls. Please hold on, callers. Okay, now you talk about a media fast.
Yeah.
Well, to me, TV and media in general seems always been geared to the lowest common denominator. And it seems that if I personally go on a media fast, that would be, to me, like catering to this lowest common denominator. So why should I go on a media fast?
The media fast, you just referred word to for you was the content. The media.
Go back over there when you talk.
He, I don't, I mean, as I heard him say that, I don't see how turning off TV is going lowest common denominator. That's a multi-leveled thing that would require a lot of quibbling over what he meant by that. So I just accept it and then give my answer, which actually doesn't respond to his point. How can turning off TV become lowest common denominator? Unless you believe TV